This is The Memory Palace. I'm Nate DiMeo. I'm just going to take a few things here and tie each one up in a bow, and then attach a small parachute, and throw them out there, and let the wind carry them where it may. First, there were the machines. They are really what did the trick. Otto Schneering was a baker in Chicago, and he had invented this treat called the candy cake. It was a chocolate bar with a tiny pastry in the center, and it was good. So he decided to put a label on it and market it. He changed the 2 C's in candy cake to K's because why not, and he founded the Curtis Candy Company. Curtis was his mother's maiden name, and it sounded way better to American ears than the German Schneering there at the start of World War I. And the candy cake did pretty well for the Curtis Candy Company. Better than its Polar Bar or Honeycomb Chip or its Earth O-Nut Dip. Good enough for Otto Schneering to expand his factory in the 1920s and automate much of its production, and bring himself closer to his greatest dream, the 5-cent candy bar. The competitions cost a dime, but the Curtis Candy Company couldn't make the candy cake on the assembly line. The pastry inside was too delicate to be made by machines. So what if instead they just threw in some peanuts? No one cares if a peanut breaks while bouncing along a conveyor belt. Plus they were cheap. Then he whipped up some nougat. He eventually swapped out expensive sugar for syrup made from corn grown right there on his farm. And he had nailed it. The nickel candy bar. It needed a name. And you can either believe he was so taken with the birth of Grover Cleveland's daughter, an event that had taken place some 30 years before. The birth of a daughter who had died some 17 years prior to Schneering figuring out the whole peanut and nougat thing, that he decided to call his candy bar Baby Ruth. Because Ruth Cleveland's name was just on everybody's lips then. Everybody was just always going on and on about, just had such joyful associations with the daughter of a former president who died tragically of diphtheria nearly 2 decades before at the age of 13. Or you can believe that he named his candy bar after Babe Ruth, the affable Yankee slugger who was a hero of children in every corner of the country, and the single most famous person in America. And then Schneering tweaked the name of his candy bar in a cutesy way because he couldn't afford to license the babe's likeness, and didn't want to be sued. Either way, Otto Schneering knew he had a winner. He just needed people to try it. Second thing, there was Doug Davis. All he wanted to do when he was a teenager was learn to fly and then get himself to Europe in time to shoot down the Red Baron. And so he enlisted, learned to fly biplanes, do barrel rolls and split S's, the high yo-yo and the low yo-yo. But when he graduated flight school at the top of his class, they told him he was more valuable as an instructor than a pilot, and he stayed stateside. And then World War I ended, and that was that for his dogfighting dreams. But he could still fly, and he bought a surplus plane off the Air Army Corps for a few $100. And then he started to make that money back $5 at a time, taking passengers up for 10-minute trips, looping loops over the hills of Griffin, Georgia. He went on the road, or over the road. He took his plane out on tour, and then he bought a few more. He started a flying circus, hired retired military pilots who didn't want to give up on the thrill of the open-air cockpit quite yet. And Mabel Cody, a daredevil, a great one, to do tricks while walking on the wing of his plane. It was an extraordinary thing. To be out pitching hay or shucking corn or hanging laundry out in the lawn in your town that was barely a town. And then have a flying circus land in some field by your house. Have these brave men and women come literally out of the blue to do a show for you, in marvelous machines you may have only read about, that were now skimming just above your head, buzzing through the open doors of your neighbor's barn, scattering the chickens, now pulling up and climbing up and spiraling down and up over a landscape you had seen all your life, that you would never quite see the same way again. Damn. Third, Otto Schneering hired Doug Davis to make Baby Ruth a household name. Here's the idea. A series of publicity stunts, all over the country. A product giveaway on a scale America had never seen. Doug Davis would fly over American cities, fairgrounds, festivals, places with lots of people, lots of potential customers. And I will read now from a flyer promoting one of the giveaways. Yes, sir. It's going to rain candy from the sky. And so it did. Baby Ruths, in red and white and blue wrappers, tied with string, and strung up with tiny parachutes, floated down through the sky over Pittsburgh. drifted past office windows. Draftsmen looked up from their tables as something caught their eye, then went over to the window. White parachutes in their dozens. Kids now in the streets below, looking up, eyes wide, hands outstretched. Best thing they ever saw. Traffic stopped now on Liberty Avenue. Women laughing, having caught a surprise dessert right there on their lunch break. And then a man in a plane right by the 5th floor window. Looked like he was laughing. That is the thing about those old planes. There was no cabin, no protective dome, and they were just about as long as 3 grown men laid end to end, and maybe a little bit lighter. And you could see the pilot from the ground as he banked and took another pass. You could have seen Doug Davis tossing out Baby Ruths, maybe catch the flash of his smile as he circled, did a gratuitous barrel roll to give him a thrill. And he could see them on the ground, see their faces, kids looking up in wonder, or looking down, scampering for a nickel candy bar. City after city. One time he dropped them over Hialeah, the racetrack down in Florida. He took a kid with him, lucky son of a gun. Gave him the thrill of his life, 9-year-old boy. First time in a plane. Suddenly tossing candy bars into the sky over Miami Beach, watching them drop, and then their parachutes pop, and then tumble for a moment, and then sway and glide away. Another thing I'll throw out. When candy rains from the sky, you don't merely get free nickel candy. You don't merely get wide-eyed wonder. You don't merely get a day upended by joy and surprise. You get parachutes that don't open up right, where one string snaps and then it spirals down to the sound of rippling fabric, or candy bars that slip their bounds and just plummet. They crack people on the head. They crack windshields. You get drivers with cracked windshields who jam on their brakes and get rear-ended. In Pittsburgh, they got people reaching too far out of the office windows to grab a free candy bar that they could have just bought for half the already insignificant price of any other bar in the market, tumbling out of the window, to be saved only by the hard fall onto a fire escape. You get emergency meetings of the city council to change aviation laws within city limits. In New York, on a perfect beach day on the 4th of July, you get a stampede, a crush of boys and girls and moms and dads, grown men, clamoring for candy. You get Yetta Kerman of 164 South 4th Street in Brooklyn, a 54-year-old woman laid up in the hospital with a broken leg. Another thing. Doug Davis's Baby Ruth drops helped make him famous. He wasn't held liable for Mrs. Kerman's leg. And he parlayed that fame into multiple business ventures. He became a pioneer in commercial aviation, delivering packages and passengers as the lead captain of what would become Eastern Airlines. One time, an 80-year-old woman wanting to take her first flight, one from Atlanta to Miami, refused to board until she was assured that the great Doug Davis would be her pilot. She waited 2 days until he was on the schedule, and then enjoyed a smooth, steady ride to the Sunshine State. But smooth and steady wasn't what Davis wanted. When he had been in the business of barrel rolls and adrenaline and wide-eyed wonder. And so, to the increasing consternation of the board members of the airline, their lead captain kept entering races and stunt flying competitions. And he kept winning, kept thrilling crowds and himself, when he wasn't keeping a commercial airliner steady, looking for smoother air for his passengers, up high where folks below couldn't see you smiling. But then one day he banked too hard on the 5th lap of an air race in Cleveland, and his plane stalled and spiraled and slammed into the ground, and he was killed instantly. A flame in a field in front of 60,000 people. And one last thing, to tie up a string and toss to the wind and see where it lands. The boy in the plane in Miami with Davis, who dropped candy on the crowd and just loved it so much he became a pilot, and named his plane after his mother, Enola Gay, and dropped an atomic bomb over Hiroshima. This episode of The Memory Palace is written and produced by me, Nate DiMeo, with research assistance from Eliza McGraw, with engineering assistance from Elizabeth Aubert. This show is a super proud member of Radiotopia, a podcast network from PRX. Our ad music is written and produced by JD Sampson. We get ad serving technology from AdZerk. We get support from listeners who donate through Radiotopia.fm. We couldn't be doing this stuff without you guys. From time to time, I like to tell you about other shows on the Radiotopia network. Today, I want to tell you about The Truth. Time to tell you the truth. Truth is, this show is great. It is a collection of short fiction. My favorites, and there are a lot, are like Black Mirror episodes for your ears. They're smart, they're twisty, they're turny, and they are impeccably produced by Jonathan Mitchell and the team at The Truth. Check it out and all the other Radiotopia shows at Radiotopia.fm. If you ever want to drop me a line, you can do so at nate@thememorypalace.us. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at The Memory Palace. And I will see you guys in a couple weeks. Or talk to you guys and you'll hear me, but you get that. See ya.
Radiotopia from PRX.